Hello everyone, it's Jim Skelly, and this is mini lecture number 6 in the current semester. There are several things I'd like to speak with you about this time through. The first is, of course, if anyone is having any difficulty, if you're taking the course for academic credit and you want to discuss the midterm with me, we can either do that by email or even have a Skype conversation. I do tend to think that Skype conversations are very useful. So if any of you have any questions, please don't hesitate. We can get in touch. We can make an appointment and have a long Skype conversation if you'd like about any of the issues that we're discussing in the course. One of the things I've seen that a number of people have completed the ecological footprint exercise. I would urge all the rest of you who have not yet completed it to please do so. I think one of the most interesting things to see from all of this is just how many planets we would need if everyone lived the way most of us do. It seems from the exercises that I've looked at that most of the people doing the exercise need at least 2 to 3 planets to live on if everybody was living the way they are. It's a good way to start thinking about how much energy you're using and how you may be contributing to global climate change. I want to mention, too, here that I saw in one of the posts, Laura Stilwell, who is a U.S. student who's studying in Mexico, made a very interesting comment about climate, and I responded there's a course discussion about this in one of the learning circles. And she was making she made a point about climate change and the fact that yet the winters are getting colder. One of the things that we must do in this class is make a distinction between climate and weather. So I'd urge you to really think about what that distinction is. You might also want to revisit in theme number 6, John Holdren's lecture. John Holdren is the science advisor to President Obama. He's someone I worked with many years ago, and I have to say he's very bright. He's a smart guy. And one of the things that you should listen to carefully is his discussion of the fact that if we use the term global warming or even climate change, we may actually be engaged in an error. And that error is, as he suggests, that we're not actually in climate change or in global warming per se, but actually in climate disruption. And what this leads to is to look at the distinction between climate and weather. All of us should think about that distinction, and you should be able to talk about it. Otherwise, you'll be deceived. And lots of the climate deniers, if you will, the people who are denying that there's any change in climate, are suggesting, look, the winter is getting colder, therefore these people who talk about global warming are incorrect. So take a look at that and think about the issues of climate disruption and the distinction between weather and climate. Okay? There are also very interesting discussions in some of the other learning circles, and I would urge you, even if it's not your learning circle, to join the discussion. I think you'll find it very, very interesting. There's a very interesting discussion about food waste in the learning circle on food. I think you're sort of shocked to see how much food we're throwing away. In the United States and the United Kingdom, every day we throw away enough food to feed 1.5 billion people on the planet. And as I think some of you certainly know, about 1 billion of the 7 billion people, about 15% of the people on the planet, don't get enough food to eat every day. So we might think about what kind of structural change is necessary. Again, keep going back to context. How do we change the social structure, right, to ensure that we are not wasting such extraordinary amounts of food? There's also a very interesting discussion about consumerism in the Learning Circle that is looking at that issue. And what I would urge you to do is take a look at the post that I just put up in that Learning Circle, in which we're talking about, again, you know, I keep coming back to this, but keep looking at the structure that stimulates consumerist activity. You need to think about, for example, as I point out in this post, you need to think about the notion of planned obsolescence. As I say in that post, when I was a boy, I can remember my father lamenting the fact that they were no longer making cars that were meant to last forever. Cars are meant to break down so that you have to buy a new one about every 5 years or so. Some people buy them more frequently. And you'll see similar things with regard to computers and to your mobile phones. So take a look at that and think about the larger, again, structural and contextual issues, so that, you know, we're not just getting seduced by the sort of personal behavior. We need to keep thinking about how these initiatives, if you will, in the realm of consumerism are stimulated by the larger social and economic structures. There are also a number of articles that I wanted to point out to you for this coming week. One is the biodiversity meeting in Nagoya, and again, it seems you know, the conference is almost over, and it seems like the protection of biodiversity will be half-hearted at best. As the author in one of the articles that I'll send you a link to says, wealthy nations, mostly here in the European Union, are accused of holding back the money needed for protection of biodiversity hotspots in poorer countries, and for failing to share the benefits that might come from exploiting the genetic resources of such areas. As you may know, many companies here create new drugs and pharmaceuticals from plants in developing countries. Another one that you will find interesting, and this is relevant especially for the Learning Circle on food, is that the World Bank has come out and worryingly said that another global food crisis may come about because of the price rise in basic food commodities. As they point out in the year 2008, well, there are different assessments of this, but somewhere between 25 and 30 countries experience food riots, and we may be headed in that direction again. So you want to take a look at that article as well. And finally, and again, this is relevant to both the Learning Circle on food and the one on climate change, and that is that, you know, it's not clear you can, at this point, certainly, link this to climate change, but there are rivers in the Amazon basin that feed into the Amazon that are now at their lowest level in a century. We're not sure why, but apparently one of the most important tributaries of the Amazon has fallen to its lowest level in over a century, and thus a fierce drought has isolated tens of thousands of people and raised concerns about the possible impact of climate change in the region. So you might want to take a look at that as well. Again, and finally, you know, although you'll probably, some of you be focused on the midterm, it's time to start looking at the second part of the class. And the next theme that we take a look at, theme number 8, is on our economy. And I'd like you to pay special attention to the work of Herman Daly here. There's a reading that we've appended to the week's readings. And this is by, Daly is sort of considered to be the father, if you will, of ecological economics. There's a 6-part, it's very short, 35 minutes in total, I think, a series of frequently asked questions of Herman Daly, posted for you to look at, as well as a longer discussion that he gives on economic growth versus economic development. And the reading that we've appended is called Economics in a Full World. Again, you're going to hear this contextual approach. What Daly and some of his colleagues in the ecological economics movement, if you will, are talking about is the fact that we need to recognize the physical limits of the planet and its resources, and therefore take a very different approach. As you will hear every day in the news, you have political leaders and economists talking about the need to stimulate more economic growth. The question is, do we have the resources to continue to do that? Can we absorb the waste that this kind of economic system is producing? And does it just replicate the kinds of consumerist behavior that Annie Leonard and others are critical of? Again, if any of you have questions about the midterm or any other issues, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'd enjoy very much speaking with each and every one of you. All the best.